So, thank you for being here. I'm Philip, I'm from Mighty Kingdom, and today I'm talking about succeeding at scale, why bigger is sometimes better. So I've actually just answered this question already. Who am I? I'm Philip, I'm from Mighty Kingdom. You can catch me on Twitter here. I may or may not answer, I'm an infrequent Twitterer. I'll give you a bit of a quick run through of my history in the games industry from a particular perspective, which you'll see shortly. I started at Ratbag back in 2005. Shortly before, it closed, taking 75 jobs with it. I then moved on to a company called Chrome, where I was there for about 4.5 years, worked with a few people in the room. And I left that in 2010 to form Mighty Kingdom just before Chrome closed and took 400 jobs with it. And so now we've been at Mighty Kingdom since 2010. We've been growing and developing games. We're up to, we're still open, right? So at the moment we're doing a whole bunch of mobile development, mobile games, up to 35 people currently. And our current growth plan has us getting up to 250 people in 5 years. Although I want to do that in 2.5 years, which everyone tells me is crazy. And so after seeing that history of what I've been through, you might ask yourself, like, why? Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to grow a company after seeing what can happen to them when they get to that scale? And to answer that question, I actually want to ask another question. If somebody wants to work on a AAA console game in Australia, where do they go? Have you seen my slides? So this is where they go. They go overseas, and you probably noticed that they're all flying Air New Zealand in this example, which is like it's a great airline. Comes from a great country. But yeah, you may notice a theme in this. What I want is for someone who enters the industry today to have the same opportunities that I had. And to do that, we need to build an ecosystem, right? We can't just have 1 or 2 great companies. We have to have the full range, from AAA down to the smaller indies. So let's just rewind back to when I joined the industry and have a look at what the ecosystem looked like back in 2005. This is a forest. You may not get out behind your computer screens very often, but these are trees. And each of these sort of represents the different companies that there are that were available in 2005. So if we have a look at a person who's entering the industry at this time, sort of starting their game dev story, if you will, you'll see that they can move up within a company. There's options for them to jump across, continue their career, grow, and so on and so forth until they sort of reach the pinnacle of one of these big studios. The other great thing about this ecosystem is that if they don't like working at this studio, there's an opportunity for them to go somewhere else and still have their experiences and their skills are still transferable. But if we know anything about the game industry in 2010, is that this happened, right? The whole thing was kind of torn down, all the publishers left, all the big studios closed, and we were forced to sort of rebuild the industry, and this is where Tony and the team from GCAP have done a great job at sort of seeding the environment that's allowed all these companies to sort of regrow. The industry as it was is built on a lot of cheap labor, basically work for hire studios working on overseas IP, for overseas companies. Whereas the industry as it is today is sort of built on the foundation of original IP and not necessarily just all work for hire. And we've seen some successes. We've seen some companies sort of popping up and we've seen some sort of great stuff happening. But yeah, if we look today and what happens when this little person comes back in and starts their game dev story again, they go through the same process, they build up their career, they get to a point where there's nowhere for them to go. And so, as we've seen, off they go. Who knew? Can you guess where I grew up, by the way? And so I can see, like, people might say, that's fine, like, Philip, you've got a company, you want to make it 250 people, you're going to do this, you're going to become this big thing. I'll let you do that. And that's great. Like, it's not for me. But what happens if we manage to get this guy back in the door, we bring him back from overseas and into our company? But what if he hates it there? Like, we're the only job in town. His skills, there's nowhere else where he can go. He can't even move down the ladder. So quite often what will happen is they just leave. They just leave the industry. And that talent is lost yet again. So we can't just have one big successful company. We need to have an entire ecosystem of lots of companies. So this is why I think this ecosystem is really important, why it matters. It provides more options for employees, so the people who are actually working in the industry they're not stuck in one company. There's places that they can go, they can take their skills without having to leave. This puts an upward pressure on wages, because if you're in a competitive environment, you have to pay people more to keep them, which is good. It's actually good for companies as well. It forces you to be a better company, because you have to be able to attract that talent to your business. And that's better for you as a business, and it's better for your employees as well. It means you have to make better games, because you have to make more money to pay for those employees. So it puts an upward pressure on quality, so the industry gets better. The quality of the products we make actually gets better. And all that talent that we're training, we get to retain it. And they get to stay in Australia, they get to put that to work for us and for our benefit, and not for, not just jump on that plane on Air New Zealand off the way to America. And everyone gets to make more money, right? Which is actually a good thing. I mean, money is not the be-all and end-all, but it's the thing that we use to leverage and grow the industry. It's a really good indicator of value. People don't spend money on things that they don't like, right? So if we can look at it this way, more money in the ecosystem, we create more jobs, which means we make more games, which leads to more money, which means more jobs, more games. So if we can keep feeding this ecosystem and growing it, we can get back to that point where we have a number of companies working at a number of different scales. And look, not everyone is motivated by money. There are some people here, who, or maybe here, I don't know if you are, who might just want to make games for art or for personal projects, which is cool. The ecosystem actually supports those people too. You might not directly be in one of those trees, just to extend this analogy even further, but you can benefit by being in the shade and the support that they give to help you live that lifestyle. So, I'm going to assume that you all want to grow your companies now, right? So how do you do that? How do you grow your company? You just hire a bunch of people. It's really easy, right? But, it's not that easy, is it? And one of the things that I hear a lot when I talk to people about growing companies is they say that it's too risky. Now, if anyone knows who this is, you're a bigger Lego nerd than I am. That's a very specific reference. But anyway, a Tom Cruise movie poster from the 80s once told me that there's a time for playing it safe, and there's a time for risky business, right? I actually think that not growing is riskier than growing. And I'll sort of explain it by showing you some charts, okay? So this chart here, which I pulled from Lost Garden, it's a couple of years old, but it kind of illustrates a point. Let's just say you have a successful game, and you make, like 10 units of profit. And then as you develop more games, you start chipping away at that. And eventually those games, they may make money, they may lose money, but you're on a negative trajectory. You have to keep making hit games for your studio to survive. So I'm going to show you some more charts that sort of illustrate how making more products actually reduces your risk. So we are. It's a great chart. So in this example, I guess the employees are eggs and the products are baskets. But by having more products, having multiple eggs and multiple baskets, you're not reliant on any one basket or product or game being successful, because you're looking at the value of the entire system. So at Mighty Kingdom, we have 2 internal teams. They're working on 6 actively developed products for 3 different clients, and that's not even including the original IP stuff we're looking to do. And so I don't have to look at the profitability of any single one of those products. I look at the health of the studio as a whole. And as long as more money is coming in than is going out, then the studio is growing in a sustainable way. So it takes the pressure off any one individual product or game to sort of fund and support the studio. And as a business owner, I actually look at it this way, right? If I fail big or I fail small, the outcome is the same. You fail, the studio closes, right? But if I go all in and I win big or I win small, there's a big difference there, right? So it's all about investing now to get those gains later. And like similar to the graph I showed before, as a service company, as Mighty Kingdom is, I've operated under this model. If we can get more clients and employ more people, make more games, it allows us to win more clients, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can literally jump in at any point on this graph and just start executing that strategy and start winning, right? So one thing I'll give you is that I don't think it's risky, but it is hard. It's not an easy path, because I think as an industry we're great at making games, but we're not great at making companies. There's a lot of focus on the quality of the products, how the experiences that we craft for our players, but we don't use that same crafting care when we're looking at how we build our companies, how we interact with our employees, and things like that. And The good thing is people have made companies before. We don't have to sort of completely reinvent the wheel, but we are an entertainment industry. We're managing creative people, and that's inherently different, I feel. And so there's a lot of things which are different for us and unique for us as an industry. This is something I think about a lot, right? I always spend a lot of time at Mighty Kingdom. It might look like I'm just playing Minecraft, but I'm actually thinking, it's a joke for a particular audience, but I'm actually spending a lot of time thinking about how we can make this company better and remove those barriers that are stopping us from doing great work. And one of the mantras that I use when I'm thinking about this is like a completely and totally original slogan that I made up by myself called challenge everything, right? I don't know where that came from. I think maybe EA can get some things right, sometimes. But yeah, I mean, as a mantra, this just means don't just do everything because other people have done it. Like, try and understand why those systems exist, how they're relevant to your business, how you can sort of deconstruct them and reconstruct them in a way that makes sense for you, your company, your industry. And for me, that started right back at the start of what is a company, right? Does anyone know? Anyway, I know what a company is. And for me, but it came down to the language that we use when we're describing what a company is, right? And you may have heard sort of people use analogies like this, like a machine. Our business is a machine, and it's about efficiency. It's about every part of the machine working optimally, and it's all about extracting value for our shareholders. I actually don't like this analogy very much, as people at Mighty Kingdom know. In this analogy, if you think about what your position is within this machine, you're just a cog, right? And a cog is a very particular thing that it just turns over and does a very particular purpose. And so when you try and move to another part of the machine or to another part of the industry, you're very specialized, and so you're trapped. You're trapped as a part of this machine. It also optimizes for a very particular function. And if there's one thing we know about the games industry is that it changes all the time. Like, you think about 10 years ago, what games we were making compared to now. Even within just mobile as a platform, think of the business models we were using 5 years ago versus what we're using now. So if you've got a machine that's really good at one thing, when the market changes, your machine is irrelevant and your company can disappear, right? The next analogy is as a family. We're a family business. This was the least awkward family photo I could find on Awkward Family Photos, so don't hold me up too much on it. But like the issue I have with family businesses, and these are often ones that where people talk about, everyone has a voice, we all make decisions together, blah blah blah. I may be just poo-pooing it a bit much, but the analogy sort of gets weird when you start to look at what people's roles are within the family, right? Is someone a dad in this? It's like, is someone my brother or sister? Like, there's not a lot of room for hierarchy, and it just gets odd, right, when you start going down that path. A lot of people talk about their companies as sports teams. This is real popular at the moment, particularly in Silicon Valley. Netflix made this really, really popular. It does have advantages, right? Like, the sport team is all about winning. It's all about coming together. There's a captain, there's a coach, there's all these sort of things. And it can handle changes to the rules a lot better. The game rules change, the team adapts and sort of continues to play. But there are another sort of a lot of negative connotations to this as well. There's only limited places on a team, right? So people who aren't performing a cut, ooh, that's pretty rugged. There are winners and losers in this sort of analogy, right? Like, one team has to be winning and one team has to be losing for the analogy to sort of hold. And for me, entertainment, the industry we're in, is not zero sum. There's not winners and losers. Like, if you have a hit game, it doesn't stop me from having a hit game, right? In fact, that can actually help because we can talk to each other. You can tell me how you did it, all your secrets, please. And then if you have that secret sauce. But in this analogy, it seems like it's really cutthroat. And I think this is really great at sort of outperforming in an established industry. But where we are right now, where we're rebuilding this ecosystem and we're trying to rebuild our industry, this is just going to, it's not a good fit for where we are. So this is the one I like to use. You guys watched Star Trek recently? They became real popular suddenly, tardigrades. Who knew? An organism, right? An organism is inherently different. It's if we have read anything from the Origin of Species, we know that they adapt to their environment. They're very, they only have the parts on them that they need to do the things that they need to do in their environment. It's natural selection and adaptation, right? Those are the two things that organisms are known for. Which is a good analogy for the games industry because the landscape will shift and we need to be adaptive and we need to know that we can change with it. And I think it's a really good analogy when we talk about growth. Like within an organism, when something becomes irrelevant, it doesn't get cut off. It gets reabsorbed and it gets repurposed and it gets to express itself somewhere else, which is how I think we need to think about our companies and our industry. When someone in our company starts to become less, if the goalposts shift and a person is left sort of hanging out where they playing a game which no one's playing anymore, just to go back to the sports team, like, I don't want to kick them out. I want to bring them back in and see if there's another way we can take the skills that they have learned and express them in a different way. So this is kind of how I think about Mighty Kingdom and how I sort of organize the structure. So I'll just go to, like, if we look at it at a very sort of basic level, this is kind of how we were maybe a year and a bit ago. Me at the top there and dressed in pink, with a bit of an exec team, and a bunch of people working on products. And the thing I always thought is like, if I can grow a company up to 20 people, I could do that again, right? So rather than go off and start another company, why don't I just like have two companies together in the same thing? So we split into the two teams and have run more or less independently, like, or autonomously, I should say, within those two groups. Well, everything I know about teams of this size means the communication is really easy. We don't have to have complex systems in place to move information around. They can talk to each other. There's enough people that they can remember each other's names. I remember most of your names. And so this is like an easy way to double the size of your team without actually having to invent a whole bunch of new systems and processes to support them. Just use the ones you've already got. If you've done it once, you can do it twice, right? Like that's the old programming rule. Do it right, do it twice. Right? So what is that? Like these two teams, right? They're not isolated from each other. They collaborate. They work together. They get shit done. They're not isolated from each other. And those of us at the top, our role is to support these teams in getting their stuff done. And by support, it doesn't mean taking control or providing direction. It's providing support and providing advice. And whether they listen to that advice, it's up to them, because the people within these teams, they know their products, they know their team, they know their market. So I trust them to be able to execute and make great product. So the other thing I do is to make sure that we are a customer-focused organization, right? So everything we do ends up with a game in someone's hand that they're playing. So everything we should be doing should be oriented towards an outcome for the customer, right? If we can make our customers happy, everything flows from that. Customers are happy, they perceive value in the products we make, they pay us money, I can pay my staff, eventually I'll buy that Tesla. Like, everything is working, right? So then the customer's not actually in the room with us, and so we need to make sure that our systems and processes like bring them in and involve them either through a proxy or through data in a way so that we can give them that voice. And Ella's actually speaking tomorrow a bit about that, about how we can actually bring customers into the conversation and through data. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock, be there. There you go, Ella. So yeah, every system and process needs to exist only if it provides a benefit to our customers. So get everything out of the way, right? Like no one reports to me at Mighty Kingdom. If I want to get information, I go down and talk to them, because writing a report to me isn't going to provide any value to a customer. I don't know anything more about what they want than what my product managers do. So why would I get them to tell me? I'm not going to approve anything, right? Like this, I need to remove myself from that equation and make sure that the customer is in my place. Yeah, and this kind of extends to our hierarchy as well. I don't actually impose a hierarchy on the teams. The hierarchy that exists needs to be there because it results in a better product for our customers. And often, so they end up not necessarily being around experience, or I should say tenure, but it's around like the value that they provide to their team, the value that they provide to their customer, often based around skill and sometimes around experience, but they're only there because they have value. And quite often, if you read the Valve handbook, they actually like to go around and destroy hierarchy if it exists for too long. Because what we find is that any system that exists for a long period of time ends up serving itself and not serving the customer. All right, there's been a lot of words lately. There's not a lot of pictures of planes flying around. Anyway, so I'll deconstruct one of the things we do. How do we do HR at Mighty Kingdom, right? Using those principles. So the first thing I ask is, like, what does HR do, right? Does anyone know what HR does? Who do they work for? They don't work for the employees usually, they work for the company, right? They're generally sort of like there to help minimize the cost of the company and maximize the return, right? They're trying to get you to work for me for the least amount that you'll accept. That's like starts the relationship off in a very negative place. So I started to deconstruct what it is that they do and see if there's a way we could do things differently, right? I also think I also put HR into this sort of group of what I call specialist hires. And I don't like specialists. I'll get to that later. So let's look at HR. What do? They recruit, they interview, they place workers. We actually do that at a team level. So I didn't need this, right? Like our teams can go out, they can define the criteria of the candidates that they want, they can find them, and then they can hire them and they can recruit them. And I don't have to be involved in that process at all. I don't need an HR person to tell someone else who's going to work well on their team. The teams can decide who will work well with them. So that's out. Right, so handle employee relations, payroll, benefits and training. Employee relations, this is another issue that gets dealt with at the team level. There's a process there where if you have an issue, you escalate it to a member, the leader of your team. If it doesn't work there, it gets escalated further up to essentially our general manager. We have a very flat structure, so it doesn't take very long to get up to the top. Our general manager also does business development and is our HR person as well. So that leaves payroll, benefits, training. Well, payroll is handled by our finance manager, who's also a semi-pro Magic the Gathering player. He's in Vegas right now, playing Magic the Gathering. He's also a former engineering student, right? So he's got a very broad skill set there as well. So then we've got training, okay? Well, training, again, can be done at a team level. You can be either self-directed and go out and decide to do training on your own. You have that right at Mighty Kingdom. But also the teams, through their one-on-ones, can help organize training around particular skill sets that you need. So look, we're sort of eliminating all these things that people think that you need in a big company, right? Look at this, plan, direct, coordinate, administrative functions. Well, we're about to move into a co-working space where a lot of the administrative stuff is actually taken care of in terms of power and things like that. And the rest of it is picked up by either our finance guy or a recently hired office admin. So if we've got those roles distributed around the company, why do we actually need HR at all? I say we don't, and so we don't have one. And if I ever have one, I've said, that's when I walk out the door. So you need to go through this process for every role of your company, right? I don't like people coming to me and say, we need to hire a senior programmer. Okay, I say, well, what does a senior programmer do? Oh, here we go again. So you can break it down, right? They manage technical risk, they help train, mentor young programmers, the single point of contact for this and that. If you break all that stuff down into the actual roles and responsibilities, you'll probably find that there are people in your company who already do those things or can take those responsibilities on. So therefore, instead of having to try to find this one particular perfect senior programmer who has all these skills, the skill set can change and it makes it a lot easier to find the person. And then through your recruitment process, it helps you sort of look at the other skill sets that will be important in this sort of organization, the softer skills and the team, how they'll work within the team and how they manage risk, how they manage problem solving and stuff like that. And so really to maximize the chances that you find someone in your company who has those skills, you should do this thing, which is avoid the specialist, right? Which is also, I do mean avoid this. This is a terrible movie, right? Don't watch The Specialist. But also specialists in terms of people who have one very particular core skill set and nothing else. They sort of fall into where Deep Blue is in this Futurama comic here. I'll give you a moment to read it. I'm judging how fast you read. A specialist should be treated like a DVD of The Specialist. You should hire them in when you need it, but as soon as you're done with it, you should take it back because the late fees on those things are just insane. But a specialist will often find a problem that only their skills can solve. So if you've got someone who does one particular thing, they will always look for a way that they can apply that one skill that they have to every problem that comes in the door. Like an engine programmer always seems to think that you can solve a problem by writing a new engine. So, I tend to try and avoid people who have got one skill and look for people who have more than that, a T-shaped professional, like this guy, right? Can you guys guess what decade I grew up in, by the way? I think it's becoming clear. This is like Mr. T, right? He's got a very broad knowledge of a bunch of different things, right? He's like, as an artist, he understands what coding is and he can talk to a programmer. But they also have like a deep core skill set. I didn't actually look where those arrows were pointing when I first put this together. Now I'm starting to wonder. The idea here is you don't want someone who can only do one thing. You want to have people who have skills or at least a broad range of knowledge so that when they're interacting with other parts of your company, when they're talking to other people, that they can get it to a certain point. They can have a conversation. Like an artist can talk to a programmer. That's a very core skill. If your artist can learn how to program, that's a great skill for them to have. It broadens their knowledge. It allows them to interact with programmers better. It allows them to understand the sort of problems that programmers have and have a common language to talk to each other. And, you know, for your programmers, literally any other skill is useful. Just get away from the computer. I'm a programmer, by the way. I'm ragging on myself. But yeah, it's good to just be able to round yourself off. And like the sort of problems that pop up every day in an organization, it's great to be able to have people with skill sets in the organization to solve them. And they can come from anywhere. Like we have one of our lead product managers was a chef before he joined us, right? So that gives him a whole different like operating environment for a high stress situation, and he's seen how that's managed, and then he can sort of apply some of those skills to gaming. Our business development guy used to be a comic book editor. We've got a whole bunch of people from film, you know, so there's like, you've got to just make sure you have people who are very well rounded so that they don't just look at a problem through one particular lens. Diversity is also a great example of how you can get different perspectives on a problem. And your hiring practices should really, really make sure that you're creating that diverse workspace as well. And I said it last year, I'll say it again, when you get great people, just get out of their way. There's no point in me trying to tell people what to do, right? I'm not going to tell an animator how to animate, so why would I tell a programmer how to program? Just, if you micromanage them, you take away their autonomy, they start to hate their job, and then you start to sort of chip away at that value that you've created. So yeah, I just tend to draw the broad strokes within which they play. Tell them what you want them to do in terms of like the outcomes you're looking for and how they actually get there, how they manage that. That's generally up to them. Which is the trick that all large organizations do, right? At any large organization, there's an element of trust. People trust that the people in the organization are working well. So you don't have to wait until you're a big company to do that. You can start trusting your staff like from day zero. And if you get it all right, if you get the right structure in place with the right people, you end up with this. You know, with a machine that prints money, right? Because ultimately, if your employees are generating more value than it's costing you, then you're making more money. And if you keep investing that money back into more employees, then you just make more money, which you can then invest back into more employees, right? I don't have to put that graph back up again, do I? But it's what I'm saying here is like you need to stop thinking about your short-term gains in terms of like the revenue you generate on one particular project or taking money off the table now, and look to reinvest it back into your team to grow the ecosystem, to grow the entire industry. Because the ultimate rewards will be bigger. Because when you've got a lot of people all adding value, making money, the number that comes out the other end is really big. And don't be afraid to experiment. Like these are the systems that work well at Mighty Kingdom. And they might not necessarily work well for you, but it's a good place to start and a good way of sort of thinking about deconstructing these problems. There are things that we don't do well at Mighty Kingdom, right? That we're trying to fix as well. So, you know, our onboarding could improve. We definitely bias towards a certain type of candidate that kind of gets our operating model very quickly, and the ones who don't tend to struggle for a while. You know, and if you've had a look at our website, you know that we don't do marketing or website design very well at all, in fact, terribly. But Jeff's on top of that, so we should be fine. But yeah, and as you're doing this, as you're experimenting, as you're trying new things out, talk to other companies, share your journey, tell them what's working for you and what isn't working, so people know what options are available to them. So they're not just thinking, oh, we're 20 people now, I need an HR manager, and with 30 people, I need to hire this guy. Like, deconstruct it and allow people new options. Hello, Marty. So anyway, let's summarize. How to grow your company, right? Understand that growth can actually reduce your risk, not increase it, right? That's something that I think people tend to knee-jerk and think that a big company is riskier in some way. Make sure your organization is customer-focused, that all your systems and processes, all the things that you're doing are resulting in outcomes for the customer, not just for yourself. Don't do things that you want to do. Do things that your customers want. You don't have to follow convention. You don't have to do the things that everyone else has done. You're allowed to go out and paint outside the lines, right? Hiring the right people will actually make you money. This is the thing, right? Like people think, if I hire lots of people, my payroll goes up, and then everything, I have to pay taxes and all these things. But if you're doing it right, those people are actually making you money. So why wouldn't you just hire more people? Because ultimately the whole thing feeds itself. But to do that, you need to keep reinvesting for those long-term gains. And the long-term returns are not just for you, it's for the industry and for the whole ecosystem in general. And if we do this right, everybody wins in this scenario, right? The entire ecosystem becomes healthy. And if you think about it, we talk a lot about getting government to come in and support. We had the Interactive Games Fund, and it disappeared after a while. At the moment, there's, 700, 800 jobs in the industry. If we want to be taken seriously, like no one's going to stick their neck out for 800 jobs. But if it's 1,000 jobs, 2,000 jobs, 3,000 jobs, now you're starting to change the conversation. People want to get on that bandwagon. So it makes it a lot easier. It makes Tony and those guys at GCAP, it makes their job a lot easier to go back in and say, look, this is industry that's on this growth curve, and look at it go. You get in now, and we can sort of send that rocket to the moon. Oh, man, Air New Zealand should get into rockets. And yeah, so we need to employ thousands of people. We need to make hundreds of millions of dollars. We don't just need to, we need to be bigger. If you were at my talk last year, you might have seen this. I get to reference myself, which is fun. Last year I talked about why we need to create billion-dollar IP in Australia, but I think I can pivot this year and say, what we actually need is an ecosystem that is dominated by independent companies, the ones that are owned by Australians, run for Australians, that employ Australians, and they're working on Australian-owned IP, not international IP. It's no good being a big company that's relying on a mothership to provide you, to drip feed you, because that mothership will just disappear when things get hard again. So we need to be fully independent. We need to be fully self-sustaining. And, you know, publishers are coming back to ecosystem. They're going to be here. And they're going to get big, and they're going to hoover up a bunch of companies. I don't want them to dominate the conversation with government. I don't want them to be the ones who are sitting there dictating what is and isn't done. If we can grow our own companies and our own robust ecosystem, then we're the ones who are in control of that narrative and in control of that conversation. I just want you all to remember that the power is yours. We're in control of this, and we can make it happen. Cool. That's it. That was quick. Any questions in the front?
Kind of got three, but I'll try to summarise it if that's okay. You talked about how your team basically manages its own HR.
Yep.
There's a couple of things that questions.
Alarm bells is ringing, yeah?
Yeah, well, I've sort of come from corporate world, and I've also worked in startups, so I kind of get both. But, you know, things that come to mind is like, how do you handle failure? How do you performance manage staff, and what if people don't gel well? You know, when those sorts of issues crop up, who do people turn to if there's like no, I guess, leader or manager?
Well, the ultimate performance metric that we look at is how well your products are performing, right? So that's generally how I look at the health of a team and what they're providing. Because if the team isn't comfortable working together, their product isn't going to be good, and the customers are going to reflect that. In terms of when issues arise, they usually get dealt with on a one-to-one level at the team level initially. We try and encourage an environment where people just talk to each other about stuff. Try not to put egos and barriers in the way there. It's not a perfect system, of course. Every system is, we iterate and we change it. What were the three things again? Are we going to write them down?
So I guess if people don't gel well, then
Oh yeah, didn't gel well. Well, the good thing is we've got two teams. You don't gel on one, you can just go to the other one, right? Like, but again, it comes down to a conversation, which is to understand. Quite often, I find that the reason people don't gel is a breakdown in communication between them. Like, people will often approach the same problem in different ways, and that's where you have those sort of conflicts. If you can understand what those are and you can find a common ground between them, then that's generally fine. And that's usually a one-on-one with each person, and maybe a sort of a mediated conversation after that. And that's generally worked for us to this point. And we do encourage people to move around in the organisation. Right? Don't feel that you're chained to the task and the product that you have. You're allowed to go and try and work on another team and see if that fits any better. I mean, the process that we use and the way we manage puts a lot of pressure on getting the right people in the door and evaluating that very, very quickly. And it's something that we have highlighted as an area we need to improve, making sure that, like I say, because a lot of what we do is self-managed and self-directed, if we get sort of people in the door who don't like to talk about problems, or who just want to sort of hide in a corner and wait for someone else to make it all go away, then they will struggle at Mighty Kingdom, because the rest of the team will move on without them. They'll just work around them. And so we're conscious about how we set up those support systems to help those people and get them back in and get them operating again. So yeah, I might do a talk on that next year. Very.
Do you mind if I just tag on a couple more things?
All right.
It's okay. So who would be in charge of sort of making it rain? Because that's another thing, like I'm trying to start my own company, but obviously the big pressure is to maintain such a huge workforce, someone's going to be out there trying to win the work or getting products that sell well. So is that like a whole team effort where you all come together and then go, this is the budget we're going to meet?
Well, yeah, I don't actually set budgets usually. Like, we're in a funny position actually. Like, one of our biggest products is a license, and so we kind of define our own budgets and our own product cycle there. The other ones are sort of client driven, so they have a budget in mind. My sort of line in the sand there is, as long as we're not losing money, I'll pretty much take any project on. What we do is we sort of lift the floor in terms of the size of those projects, so we don't sort of take anything under, say, $500,000 these days. That's sort of our floor. No ceiling, never put a ceiling. But yeah, so we are constantly looking at ways of feeding more stuff into the pipeline. A lot of that is like networking. Every single person in Mighty Kingdom, that's a responsibility that they all have when they're at these events, and there's a lot of them there, right behind you, don't turn around, is that they're out there repping Mighty Kingdom, right? They're talking, they're representing us as a destination to work, but also as a place to do work, right? Like JF in the front row here, I've seen him at many conferences, and just recently he put us in contact with an animation studio in Singapore, which has resulted in a project for us. So, you know, it's no one person's responsibility. We have a single person in the studio who kind of like collates all that stuff and makes it sort of, you know, makes sure that conversations are followed up. But when a project comes in, there's like anyone can put their hand up to say, I want to pitch on that, and they get to put their hand in. We put a pitch out recently where 3 different people like contributed like different ideas to it. And the pitch before that was 3 different people. So everyone does it. That's probably not the answer you're looking for.
That's great.
And do you have one more question before I take the ones at the back? All right. The loudest one, just yell at me.
Hi. So you said you can use this to grow a company from 20 staff to 40 staff. Would you say it's a similar process if you've got a company of 3 staff moving to 6, or is this a totally different?
Well, to get to 30, I had to go past 3 and 6. So I've been there. It is quite different. I found with Mighty Kingdom at that stage, a lot of it was just in my head, and I wasn't very good at articulating that sort of vision at that stage. At a studio that small, everyone can hold pretty much every project variable in your head, so you don't need to do a lot of stringent communication and stuff like this. You just talk and have coffees and everything kind of gets done. That sort of works to about 12, you know, and then beyond that, you start to forget what people are doing, or you need to start putting things like agile methodologies, and you have to write shit down. I hate writing shit down. So 3 to 6 is actually one of the more fun jumps. To the way I did that, so we were a team of about 4 or 5, and I kind of realized that I needed to get bigger because I needed to not be programming in Mighty Kingdom anymore. So I needed more clients. I actually wanted to hire like Dan, who's our business development manager. I wanted to hire him to sort of manage the team so I could do other things, but I couldn't afford him because when you're only 4, pretty much every dollar comes in goes into someone's wages. So I went out and hired 3 programmers before I had any work to force myself to go find the work for those 3 programmers so I could hire Dan to manage all the programmers. So I kind of put myself in a position where I couldn't fail, or at least, you know, I had to win. That works for me. Everyone gets motivated in different ways. But like I said, I've always thought, what's the worst that can happen in a scenario, right? I hire 3 people, it doesn't work, I just fire the 3 people. And I'm back where I was, and nothing sort of, no harm, no foul, right? Other than for those 3 bridges that were burned. But you know, you can manage at risk through contracting and stuff like that to sort of try and do it. But yeah, I find that the best advertisement for your product, for your services, is your products as well. And the bigger we got, the better our products got, which meant that we landed better contracts. So you know, it can be a risky jump. But yeah, I was recently talking to someone about how we grew Mighty Kingdom and the contracts that we got. And there was no single part of that story which was of any use to him at all, because it's all very fortuitous series of circumstances. And I think every business is kind of like that. Like, you got to maximize the opportunities when they appear. And so for me, one of the things was like, if someone gives me a budget to make a game, this is going to be the advertisement for our next game. So I have to make sure every single dollar ends up in this game and not just in some bullshit manager or account person or an engine team or anything like that. I just got to do everything we can. I used to say I was a lazy programmer. Someone told me I was a smart programmer. And that I hate reinventing the wheel. I hate having wasted my time coding something that something else has already coded. So I will use the Unity asset store every day just to go and pull things down and just take the benefit of someone else's work and just build on top of that. Focus your attention on the things that are going to differentiate you and make your products better. It's a very rambling answer to your question. Joel, you go.
This is something you and I have discussed at length. I mean, obviously at the moment there's no real place in the education industry in Australia to learn the skill set that you're obviously showcasing here, and you've spoken about professional development as a key source. Is there anywhere that you would advise for the developers here where they can go out and learn this skill set that they need to act as a business owner as opposed to their particular skills?
That's a good question. That means there's still value in doing like a traditional MBA or like a business management degree. It tells you how to do some. I don't have a degree, by the way, so I don't try and don't hold that against me. But I think there's enough peculiarities and unique qualities to the games industry that a lot of the things you learn there aren't immediately relevant. They sort of tell you how to build companies under a system that is already established or is already working well. And they tell you best practices, and they tell you to hire HR when you get to 20, and they tell you to do all these things. That can be good to know what the options are, so that you know what are the things that you're going to need at different scale. The thing that's worked best for me is to talk to other people who are doing it. And one of the things we talked about is there's not a lot of people in Australia who are growing a company to 400 people, right? There's a lot of people sort of seem to get quite comfortable with a studio around 20 to 25, and they fear that next step, that next level. They like I say, they think it's quite risky. So I don't know if there's any sort of formal education is valuable, but I don't think anything's going to tell you how to run a games company in 2017 specifically, unless AIE are writing notes right now and they're going to put a course together for us, which could happen. But yeah, like for me, like mentoring and just networking with other companies has been the best result for me. Your mileage may vary. Langers, since I know your name.
Yep. In terms of like of having the sort of flat structure and the way that's sort of working for you right now, like when do you think the same sort of thing will there be any what sort of changes would you see if there was a project that had 100 people on it? I sort of feel like that might end up becoming different cliques, so like you might have 35 artists or something on that project, but that might not.
As long as they're not all 35 artists on one team, that would be bad, because then they all start to just speak in a different language and stuff like that. Because that probably means there's a team of 35 programmers somewhere, which is even more scary.
To make an AAA game, there needs to be like lots and lots
Yes.
of people.
So the way I think about systems and processes in that regard is that when you are building a product, you're basically being responsible for a particular component, and you're taking a series of inputs from your product manager, from the art team, or whatever it comes in. You're doing your work, and then you're passing that on to somebody else. So the team structure is there as sort of like a way of deconstructing things like HR, and so when we do things like leave, you communicate within your team. You don't necessarily have to report it back up to sort of like a higher structure, and so the teams can just then be, they can know that another team is taking care of something else, right? The teams do collaborate, they do work on things. In fact, people switch between them quite often, or, in our new office, we're getting our desks on wheels so people can actually literally just roll over next to each other. And so I would see that as being a series of autonomous teams, or I should say, autonomous in terms of being able to have all the functions that they would have within their own groups, but all collaborating together on a larger project. So there'd be someone within that structure who would be responsible for the overall vision of the project, and everyone else will fall in behind that. So we have a flat structure. It doesn't mean we don't have hierarchy, right? Like the difference here is that the hierarchy is dictated by the project, either by its scale or by the needs of that team. Like if you've got two very experienced programmers working on a team, no one needs to be a lead in that regard. There's no need to impose a structure on that. But if you've got, say, 3 juniors and a mid, you probably do need to have some structure there to help support them and help them grow. So as long as there will be structure within that. On a 100-person team working on a AAA game, that's going to be exciting. But yes, it's just not the traditional structure that you're used to. Does that answer it? What's up? In the back.
Would you rapidly scale to a company that's 200 plus size, that's working on AAA development content or multi-development year cycles, where you've got to hire new staff, upskill existing staff,
Yes. At the moment, that comes from our clients who pay us money to make games. The difference here is like the way that I've been scaling is that instead of taking that profit and putting it in my pocket, I've put it back into more staff to make more product, right? So for us, it'll be a stepping stone of just bigger and bigger projects. And our project scales are, the biggest project we just pitched on was $4.5 million. So our project scales are getting bigger, which is good. And we do that by targeting particular brands. There's a certain point that you get to in terms of projects where budget isn't a concern. For very, very large brands, they're far more outcome focused. They have a particular problem, a particular thing that they need. They've got an opportunity with a product, with in a market. They understand that it will cost them money to get the product that they want, and they'll pay, which is great, right? We did a project early on with Disney, which was very profitable for us, but we were able to use that money to invest into Shopkins, which is the license that we use that sort of underpins probably half of our studio at the moment. Which is what I mean by we have to keep reinvesting. Like, there's an opportunity there for me to like buy a house, right? I could have just checked out at that moment, but that wouldn't have served the needs of the industry. It wouldn't have served the needs of the vision I want Mighty Kingdom to be as well. So 2.5 years is very ambitious to get to that scale. I understand that. The risk for me isn't finding those projects, because they're out there. There's projects everywhere. And in fact, the bigger you get, the easier it is to find them, because people actually find you at that stage. The hardest part for me is going to be finding the right people and getting them up to speed very quickly. So that's where I see the risk. The risk isn't in the work, because I know if we do the rest of the pipeline properly, the work will come to us. The risk for me is getting the right people to do that work.
What happens when you transition from client work to original IP development?
I actually don't think we will ever stop doing client work. I see us as having sort of like 3 pillars to our finances. We're getting into my business plan now. I've actually got it on here somewhere. I could probably bring it up. I see there being 3 pillars to our revenue. One being licensed products, which like we do with Shopkins, where we take a brand and we build a portfolio of products around that brand. But that's revenue we control on product, like budgets that we control. Client work in terms of, I'll pay you X to give me Y. That's very important. And the third one would be original IP. But I actually see original IP in terms of, so those are like our 3 different revenue centers. But in terms of actual revenue share, I think original IP will probably be like half of our revenue in 5 years' time. The reason I want to keep working with like brands and clients is that it opens so many doors, right? Like the One Animation who we're working with in Singapore have got a lot of contacts through to Netflix, through to Cartoon Network, through to a whole bunch of different distribution platforms regionally in Southeast Asia and in Europe that we just don't have access to, right? Working with Lego, I'm not supposed to say that. Working with another partner that we have over in Denmark, that puts a credibility on Mighty Kingdom that is difficult to get on your own, right? When people see, like Disney was a great key that unlocked a whole bunch of opportunity for us. Because people go to you, oh, Mighty Kingdom, right? What do you do? Who have you worked with? You say Disney, and they're like, oh, fine. Like, have all this money. It's like, that's sort of how we plan to go. Again, like getting back to what I see as the risk for Mighty Kingdom, not capitalizing on our opportunities in terms of the market that we have with Shopkins and that license and that audience that we have. That's a risk for us. If we don't create original IP, that will be a failure, and that will have long-term impact on us. The other source of revenue is government, right? We want to try to get that environment back together where government can come along and help share some of that risk, because original products are risky, right? And any way we can de-risk that means we can get more product, more jobs, better products, blah, blah, blah. Down the front.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
Uh-oh.
But what
I'm on a spot.
are your fixed expenses for wages per month right now?
Actually, do you know what? I actually don't know. And you know why? Because I have a guy who takes care of that, and I trust that he's doing it well. So the way I operate, though, in terms of budgeting and how I think about it, is I just have a number that I multiply. So I say, like, on average, people cost us like 10 grand a month, right, in terms of all the inclusive costs. So therefore, for 35 people, we have to come up with 350 grand a month. That's how I operate. And as long as the numbers sort of add up at that level, then I don't bother to interrogate it further. But like I say, there's a guy who sits there pulling hair out, solving their problem for me, even though he's now playing Magic the Gathering in Las Vegas. Go figure. Yeah, down the back.
Yeah, so you talked a lot about how to grow your company and encourage other people to grow the company, and that's great. What do you think a mid-sized company like Mighty
Mid-sized. Aww. I think what I'm trying to do is to show people that you can grow and it's not scary, right? That's the first thing. And to show them that there's a path to doing it and retaining the core things that made you a fun place to work when you were a 15-place studio. I'm putting them on the spot now. Is Mighty Kingdom a fun place to work? Yeah, so there we go. The answer is yes. But yeah, so like, I'm also pig-headed enough to want to do it in Adelaide, of all places, right? Because I think that as an industry, we are working remotely anyway. Our audience isn't Australians. It is Americans and it's Chinese people and it's Europeans. So like, there's no additional benefit other than sort of the support that you get from the government to doing it in Adelaide or doing it in Brisbane or doing it in Perth. We're all remote workers, right? So I want to show that you don't have to move to Melbourne to do this. So that's another thing where I think we can provide value. I'm willing to talk to anyone about anything, but particularly about growing companies. So if there's any value that I can provide in terms of what to do and what not to do, I'm happy to be that guy. But yeah, I think ultimately as well, you know, we want Adelaide to be the epicenter of this change in the industry, right? We want that first big, tall oak to grow. I think they're all oak trees. I don't know what an oak tree look like. I want that to grow in Adelaide, right? And I don't care if it's me. I don't care if it's Mighty Kingdom. I don't care if it's Shark Jump. I don't care if it's Team Fractal Alligator or any of the other companies there. Because as soon as one goes up, it makes the job a lot easier for the rest of us to follow, right? Because we can point at them and go, we're like them, but just not there yet, right? And so then the conversation changes. So I want to create that environment where it allows a company to grow in South Australia to that scale. So those are the things I'm working on. What are you working on? Daniel?
How deep of a passion you were in the development side of things, going back to when you were a team of 4 and stuff, and was there a personal barrier to knowing that now you have to transition into business development and sort of giving up the development side?
Yeah, there wasn't sort of like a moment. There wasn't sort of like an aha moment. It was just sort of like an extended sort of extraction. Because I'm sort of silly, I started another company as well, another games company, and that forced me to walk out of Mighty Kingdom and be somewhere else physically, and that was actually the best thing that I could have done for Mighty Kingdom, because they learned to sort of stand on their own without me being there. Ella, who's sitting there, who's giving a talk tomorrow, she was sort of instrumental in that phase of helping us sort of bake in a bunch of processes that allowed our products to grow in such a awesome way. Chris, who I saw before, there he is. You know, he stepped up really big time when I stepped away as that sort of lead programmer, and he's sort of now our lead engineer. So by getting out of the way, it actually made our company better, because everyone sort of filled in the roles and had to, right? Because I wasn't there, and that was really good. And that sort of made me realize that in some ways, trying to have your finger in every pie just messes up all the pies, right? Like, you've seen American Pie, it's a bit like that, but with fingers. What am I going there? That's our safe word. So, yeah, it is challenging. And for me, it's like any person within our organization should be looking at their own skill set and saying, where can I apply myself to provide the best value for our customers or for Mighty Kingdom, right? And for me, at a certain point, that was no longer as a programmer. I still do a little bit of programming here and there and help out sort of optimization stuff, shaders, or a lot of shaders. But that's not where I can provide value. Right? These guys trust me in the sense that I have a vision and I'm directing the company towards that. So they, I hope, trust that I am thinking really hard about that problem and putting systems in place to solve that. And in turn, I trust them to make the products and solve their problems. They'll come and talk to me if they need to. They'll come up to me and say, I need help with X or Y. And I do have a lot of one-on-ones with staff to keep making sure that information is moving around the organization. But yeah, there was no sort of singular moment. But I would say, if I'm going to pick a number, I'd say 10 people. Yes?
I'm a massive fan of the saying, you bite off more than you can chew and then chew like hell. And
That's how I eat my dinner, by the way.
talk about expansion a lot, but some of the big companies, I worked at Logic, one of the biggest companies in Australia.
Great company, they make great movies.
Got up to 500 people, and then 3 projects finished around the same time, and within a couple of weeks, 300 staff were looking for jobs. So I kind of want to know what do you like expand and contract because work is not always going to be there, or you're just going to just going for it, you know what I mean?
Well, this is where we can take advantage of the games industry in our favor, right? So Animal Logic, if I'm correct, animation studio that does linear narrative for film and television.
Yeah.
When a film is finished, that's the end. The film goes to the studio, I don't know where a film goes. I think you're just realizing this. They project it somehow onto a screen and people watch it and pay money for it, but then it goes away, right? There's no continuous work. With a game, releasing is kind of like the first step of that. So for most of our projects, even our client work, you get to the point where you release the game and then you support it, and that team, it's not the entire team, but a portion of that team will continue to support that product for a long period of time, up to 1 or 2 years. Like the way we've constructed the company, in the early days I did sort of contract people to the length of a project, but we've never actually executed that end. Like we've just kept people coming on and on again. We actually flicked from monthly contracts to quarterly to annual, and now I think we're just going to move to permanent contracts because we just don't let people go. That's probably news to the Mighty Kingdom people. Yeah, because our industry is different. Like that's pretty much the only answer I can have there. Like there's the peculiarities about our industry which work in our favor. And if those people who are supporting a product are working profitably, then they can actually support the rest of the team to work on something else and to sort of take a punt. Which is sort of how we grew Shopkins in the early days. And it's sort of how we've managed to retain our staff and grow to this point as well. Yeah. If you want to learn how to grow a good free-to-play game business, you should see Ella's talk tomorrow, 12 o'clock. There's 2 plugs now. Any more questions before we wrap it up? Thank you all for coming.